Hey there, and welcome to the Ridge Community Church Online. My name is Allison. I get to be your host for today's service. And if you're checking us out for the first time, curious what a church service online is all about, or have questions about faith, anything at all, we are so glad you are here with us today. We believe that Jesus is for everyone, and that includes you. So as a church, we are here for you too. And if you're looking to ask a question, share something that's on your mind, talk over something with somebody, we're here for you. So we'd be happy to do that. We have our online team standing by in the chat. So chat with them during the service today and share what's on your mind. If you're watching this later, you can leave a comment on the video and someone from our team will get in touch with you later in the week. Well, today is a great day to visit because we're kicking off a new series called On the Run. And don't worry, if running isn't your thing, this isn't like one of those YouTube videos on all the benefits of running. If you're into that, there are plenty of apps on the App Store that can help you with that. Although our teaching pastor, Tyler, probably could give you some pretty good advice. But today, we're gonna look at a different kind of running that is not helpful for us. You know, we may be running from something in our lives, maybe a conflict or a new relationship, or maybe we're running for something we feel God is calling us to do. What we'll learn in a moment from our teaching pastor is what to do when we are on the run from this. And before we learn from him, we're going to turn this over to our band, who's going to help us connect with God through music. And what I'd encourage you to do is get rid of any distractions right now. You know, close other tabs, turn off notifications, really be in this moment with God, to be together with him and our community, and let's commit to our time together with him.
Church, we're so glad you're here. We're gonna sing, we're gonna shout, we're gonna praise his name.
Now want to welcome everyone who's joining us in Oak Creek, Franklin, everyone online, and to everyone in Greenfield. It's so great to be with you today. My name is Tyler, and I serve as one of the pastors here, and hope you've been having a great summer so far. My family has been having an awesome summer. It started with a road trip out to throughout the Midwest, where we went through Ohio and Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin. It's been really cool to see all the different things there, and then we've been spending a lot of time with different neighbors, friends, family members, and then my kids, their birthdays are 10 days apart, and so we actually just went through what I call the birthday gauntlet, where my son turned 7, my daughter turned 11. We had 3 birthday parties within 2 weeks with different friends and family members, but it's been a lot of fun celebrating. And we actually get to continue the summer together, have a great summer, by kicking off a series today called On the Run. And so with On the Run, here's how we're going to start this series. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer by raising your hand. Oak Creek Franklin, I want you to do the same thing online. You can say this is you in the chat, but who of us would say that we consider ourselves a runner of some type? Just go ahead, raise your hand. Yeah, we have a few sharing their hands up. Okay, that's fine. Here's how I say you know someone's a runner or a CrossFitter. Just talk to them for about 10 minutes. Because I can't help but bring it up, okay? I can say that because I am a runner. I've actually been running for several years, but then around 2020 during the pandemic, when running was really the only thing I could do because the gyms were closed down, I actually ended up meeting some neighbors in my neighborhood, and we started running. We decided to start training for some marathons together, and it was just a lot of fun, where running has really become, for me, this life-giving hobby. Just absolutely love doing it, enjoying it, and challenging myself that way. Now, whether you consider yourself a runner or not, the good news is that as we go throughout this series called On the Run, we're going to learn from one of the most famous runners of all time, and it's not about physical running, so we're not going to talk about that, for several weeks. What we are going to do is we're going to learn from this runner named Jonah. And Jonah, he was actually most famous for running from God. Now, maybe you're not familiar with the Bible. Jonah's story is actually told in the Old Testament part of the Bible, where it actually happened several hundreds of years before Jesus. But my bet is that maybe you've heard a little bit about Jonah's story before, because one of the most well-known things about Jonah's story is that Jonah is told to have been swallowed by a fish for 3 days, and he lived to tell about it because the fish came back and spit him back out as God gave him another chance to do what he asked him to do. And for a lot of people, this is where they struggle with the story of Jonah. They're like, I'm not so sure if I can go there and believe that this actually happened. Now, we're going to just address that up front, because I want to get that all of us on the same page as we jump into Jonah's story. And I'll just say this. I actually believe that Jonah's story did happen, and there's a couple reasons why I believe that. One is that there's actually some scientific evidence that this could actually happen. We're seeing some whales today actually have mouths big enough to actually swallow a person whole, and their stomach chambers are actually large enough to contain a person in there. In fact, a couple years ago, there was this man named Michael Packard who was actually deep sea diving in Cape Cod. He actually got swallowed by a whale. The whale took him down to the bottom and then brought him back up and spit him out. And Michael actually lived to tell about it. In fact, we got a great picture of him. He's giving a thumbs up. He's loving life after he got out of the whale, and we're glad that he's okay. But even more than that, when we read about the story of Jonah, it's not told as this fairy tale story. It's actually told as this historical narrative where Jonah is this real person. Nineveh, which we will talk about in a little bit, is this historical city. And it's written as something that happened. And the biggest reason why I believe this happened is because Jesus talked about the story of Jonah. And Jesus actually used Jonah's story as a way to foretell what was about to happen to him when he was going to be killed on the cross, buried for 3 days, and then rise again to give us a new life as he defeats death and sin. And I think of it like this way. If we as followers of Jesus, can believe that Jesus actually died, was buried, and then rose again so that we could receive new life, and if we believe that God created everything, including the land and the sea and everything that we live in, then God using a fish to swallow a man to fulfill God's purpose for him, for me, seems to be in the realm of possibilities. But I also want to acknowledge that there are many who would read the story of Jonah and say, yeah, I don't think this literally happened. I think this is a figurative story to tell us what happens when someone is on the run from God, because that just can't actually take place. And if that's you, I want you to know that's okay. We are so glad that you are here. And the good news is that however we approach the story of Jonah, we can all take the principles out of the story and apply them to our lives today, because these principles are so helpful. And the reason for this is because most of us, if not all of us, we've all been runners from God. Some of us, we are running from God right now. And we might say, hey, I'm going to run away from God, or maybe you've stayed away from God and you've come up with different reasons why. Maybe you've used the reasons like, hey, I just believe in science, and because of science, I just don't know if I can go there. But really deep down inside of you, there's no reason why you want to go there, because you're like, I just don't want to go there, so I'm going to use science as my reason to not check out the claims of God for myself. Others of us, we're running from God, or we're staying away from God because of our view of the church or other followers of Jesus. We're like, I just don't want to be like them. And if you're here today and if you're dealing with some church hurt, I want you to know we are so sorry that you're dealing with that hurt. And we consider it an honor and just a privilege that you would trust us by actually being here with us at one of our locations or watching online and just exploring this for yourself. So thank you so much for that. And then others of us, we are followers of Jesus, and we realize that God has called us to take a step, and there's just something inside of us that said, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. And as a result, we are running from God when it comes to that step. And here's what we have learned when it comes to running from God. Running from God has never made our lives better. In fact, it often makes it worse. It complicates things at the very least. And what usually happens is it damages a relationship that we have with God, or it damages a relationship that we have with other people. And so our goal as we go throughout this series, as we look at Jonah through On the Run, is that we would actually go from running from God to experiencing this repairing, that we'd go from running to repair, and the repair would happen in our relationship with God or our relationship with other people. And so that's what we're going to do as we go throughout this series. And we're going to start today right where Jonah's story starts. And where Jonah's story starts, actually, he's in this beautiful city called Joppa. And Joppa is right by the Mediterranean Sea. And it is so beautiful. It's overlooking this water. And so as you can see, Jonah will be overlooking something like this when God gives Jonah this clear assignment. And here's what God tells Jonah. He says, Jonah, I want you to go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. And so God gives Jonah a pretty clear assignment. And although it's clear, this isn't easy. Because what he's telling Jonah is, I want you to leave this beautiful city of Joppa, and I want you to go to the city of Nineveh, which is going to be about 550 miles northeast, and it's going to be a long travel. Now, Jonah doesn't want to do this, and I get why he doesn't want to do this at first, because he doesn't have to just travel to Nineveh. That's a long travel. Nineveh is also this capital city of the Assyrian Empire. And the Assyrian Empire was known for its brutality and its violence and its mistreatment of people throughout this time of history. In fact, Nineveh is known as the city of blood, and the Assyrian Empire, which Nineveh is the capital of, they actually built their economy by stealing and plundering from their neighbors. And so that's how they're getting rich, and they would do this in brutal and violent ways. And they would do this in ways that would mock those that they were conquering. In fact, history tells us this, that one of the things that Assyrians would often do is they would conquer people, and then they would cut off the legs and one arm off the people as they captured them, as a way to shake them, to mock them as they would die. And as God gives Jonah this assignment to go preach against them, Jonah's like, oh, I know what they're going to do to me. I don't want to go through with that. So here's what Jonah ends up doing. Jonah runs away from the Lord, and he heads for this land called Tarshish. And here's where Tarshish is. It goes in the complete opposite way of where Nineveh is. It's not just 550 miles the opposite way, it's 2,500 miles in the opposite direction. God tells Jonah, hey, I want you to go to present-day Iraq, and he says, nope, I'm going to go by boat instead, and I'm going to sail over to Spain. This would be like us today in Milwaukee. Hey, if we're told to go to Buffalo, we'd say, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and sail over to Hawaii instead. I mean, it's the complete opposite direction. Now, why would Jonah do this? Jonah is doing this because he wants to avoid those people. You might wonder, well, who are those people? And Jonah would say, those people are people who are mistreating other people and they're rebelling against God. And don't miss this. By running away from God, Jonah becomes those people where he's rebelling against God and he's mistreating the people that God has told him to go and warn them about what he's about to do. And so Jonah, he buys this boat fare, he starts sailing off to Tarshish, and God is not done with Jonah yet. Here's what happens to him. The Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. And all the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. And the word sent that is being used here to describe what God's doing to Jonah actually could be better translated to the word hurled. Meaning, they would use this word in another part of the Bible in the Old Testament that was describing how someone was hurling this spear at another person to pin him against the wall. So literally, God is just hurling the storm, the wind and the sea is just raging against this boat, and it's getting Jonah's attention. Now, we might often realize, hey, if we're running from God and we see the wind and the storms come up against us, we might think, oh, this is a sign of God abandoning me and God giving up on me because things are getting tougher. And the good news is that God isn't giving up on us. He's showing us that we can run from him. He's just not going to let it be easy on us. And it's not easy for Jonah. So Jonah sees the storm, and here's what he does when the storm comes. Jonah went to the deck below where he laid down and he fell into a deep sleep. You might wonder, why is Jonah sleeping in the middle of the storm? And maybe an idea is that Jonah just got that superpower that dads of newborns get. And this happened to me. I loved it. You know, when my kids were newborn babies, I had this ability just to sleep. Like there was these mornings I'd wake up and I'd tell my wife, Andrea, I'd say, isn't it so great that our kids let us sleep throughout the night? You know, I got that restful 8 hours of sleep. It was amazing. And she would look at me like she was ready to attack. And she said, Tyler, I was up 4 times last night while they were crying. I don't know why you can't hear this. Maybe Jonah has that ability, but maybe more likely, here's what Jonah's doing, what many of us do when we face a storm in our life. He's doing whatever he can to escape the pain. And some of us, when we face the storms that's going on around us, we might escape by trying to work more, or we go for that one extra drink, or we find a way to numb the pain. Jonah's finding the way to numb it right now by going to sleep and sleeping through the storm and trying to avoid it altogether. Now, we aren't the only one who's wondering why he's asleep. The captain of the boat, he's wondering why Jonah's asleep too. And here's what he says to him. He goes to Jonah, how can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish. And if you're a follower of Jesus, have you ever had a time in your life where someone in your life wasn't following Jesus and they reminded you that you are a follower of Jesus? Over the last couple of months, I've had some individuals who are close friends of mine and family members of mine. They would shoot me these Facebook messages, and they'd tell me about the storms going on in their lives. And they would say, I don't know what to do about this, but I know that you're like close to God, is what they would say. Can you pray for me? Can you help me deal with what's going on? And of course, I'd pray for them, and I was honored that they would ask me to do that. But it was this reminder for me that we often go through storms, and it's when we're going through storms that we are most open to God. And so this captain, he is open to God, and it's not just him. The sailors are being open to God as well. And the sailors of the ship, they said to one another, hey, come, let us cast lots to find out who is responsible for all of this. And so they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. And casting lots was one of their ways that they would pray back then. What would happen is they would ask God a question, and that they would take either some of these rocks or these sticks, and they'd mark them up to represent different people and say, okay, God, what's going on? They pull out the stick or they pull out the rock, and whichever one signified who it is, that was what they believed to be the answer to their prayer. So they'd pull out that rock or their stick, and they realized it was Jonah's, and it was referring to him. They'd do it again. It was calling out Jonah. They'd do it again. It was calling out Jonah. So they're like, clearly Jonah's involved with all of this. So they go to Jonah, and they ask him, hey, tell us who is responsible for making all of this trouble for us. Hey, what kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you? And so Jonah looked at them and answered, well, I'm a Hebrew. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven who made the sea and the dry land. And what Jonah's telling them is, I don't just know the answer to your question. I am the answer to the question. And I'm following God, who's getting my attention right now. And they heard this, and they immediately become terrified. And they asked him, well, Jonah, what have you done? And they knew he was running away from the Lord because Jonah had already told them so. And for the sailors on the boat, they're starting to connect the dots. They're like, hold on a second, Jonah. You told us that you were running from God, and this is the same God who made the land and the sea, and you thought you would run by getting on this boat to sail away from him? Like, how's this working out for you, genius? Like, what's going on here, you know? And they can clearly see that this isn't working out well for him. And often when we run from God, the challenge for us is we think we can get away with it. And we think we can manage it and hide it so no one else outside of us can realize what's going on. But this happens every single time. When we are running from God and we think we are managing it, everyone else outside, they see what's going on and they see that we're running. And we may try to explain it away. We might say, oh, it's just one more drink. It's not that big of a deal. I can handle it. Or it's just a flirtatious text with that person. It's really nothing. It doesn't matter. There's no feelings there at all. Or I just need my personal time right now. I'm just going to take that season off of Ridge Group. I'm going to take that season off of serving. Or I just need some extra time. I'll just stay away from church from now. I'll be okay. We'll be fine. It's fine. But here's what happens every single time. Though we may try to cover it up, we may try to hide it, the truth always comes out. And the truth has come out for Jonah. And it comes out this way. The sea was getting rougher and rougher. And so the sailors asked him, hey, what should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us? And they're saying, Jonah, if this is your responsibility, you should be the one to pay for this, not us. And Jonah agrees with that, and he tells them, hey guys, pick me up, throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. And Jonah's starting to take responsibility, and what we start seeing is that when we begin the early steps of this journey from running to repairing, one of the first things we have to do is get honest with ourselves and acknowledge, yeah, I'm running. Jonah's acknowledging that this is his responsibility. He says, throw me in the sea. It'll be better for you. And they're like, well, we don't know if we want to go that far. We'll just try to, sail against the wind, but the wind just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So finally they reach a point where like, okay, Jonah, we'll do it, but we need to talk to God first to make sure that, we won't be punished for this. And so they call out to God and they say, hey, Lord, don't let us die for taking his life. Don't hold us accountable for killing him. For you, Lord, have done as you please. Like they're saying, God, this is on you. And so they took Jonah, they threw him overboard, and then the raging sea grew calm. And maybe you can relate to Jonah here, where you're feeling battered, beaten, tossed around in the waves. And you feel like, maybe everyone around you might be better that you are away from them. And if that's you, here's what I want you to pay attention to, is that God, he actually doesn't give up on Jonah. Because this would be the point in the story where God could just go ahead and move on to the next person. But God doesn't do that. God doesn't send another plan in. God doesn't give up on Jonah. God actually wanted to keep going after Jonah because he still wanted to use Jonah to accomplish his purpose. That's the reason why he sent the storm, because he wanted to continue to use Jonah and show him that Jonah still matters to him. And God will do this for all of us. That whenever we try to run from him, God says, I'm going to do something to get your attention. For Jonah, it was the storm. And for me, it was something very similar. In fact, when I was in my early 20s, in my early college years, that was a season of my life that I was running from God. I became a follower of Jesus in my teenage years, and I was taking steps to follow him. And I even had people in my life say, hey, Tyler, I think God is like doing something in you that maybe you can even, maybe become a pastor someday to help many people follow Jesus. And I said, absolutely not. That's not going to be a really good idea. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to actually take matters into my own hands. I had a dating relationship that I really liked, but we weren't fully honoring God in that dating relationship. I wanted to take on careers in my life where I said, hey, I just want to go ahead and pursue these careers like teaching, and one idea was counseling, and so I started going into college like that. But then I wanted to take steps even further and just kind of do my own thing. I was working other jobs where I said, you know what, I want to make some more money, and I had the ability to schedule my own shifts, so I scheduled shifts that took me out of my small groups, that took me out of serving opportunities, that actually took me away from church, and I kept on taking these steps further and further away from God. And then here's what ended up happening during that season. That girl and I, we broke up. And it devastated me. And I found myself very lonely during that time. I was taking these classes for these careers that I wanted to do, and then I didn't want to do them anymore. And I got dissatisfied with it, and then I got afraid for my future and worried, and I started dealing with all of this anxiety. And I realized that I found myself in this storm, like these winds were starting to come upon me. And then I started to learn what Jonah was going to learn, that God wasn't done with me yet. And God's not done with you yet. In fact, when we look at this first part of Jonah's story, there's a few things that we can learn and apply to our lives right now as we go on this journey from running to repairing. And here's the first thing we learn. First thing we learn is that we acknowledge that we are all runners, that we all run from God in some way. Some of us are running from God right now. We have run from God, or we will run. And we run from God primarily in one of two ways. We run from God by breaking the rules or by keeping all of the rules. And we might actually kind of think naturally about running from God as, hey, I'm just going to disobey God and do my own thing and break the rules like what Jonah's doing right out here, right away in this first chapter. But we could also run from God by trying to be self-righteous and keep all of the rules. And Jesus talks about this in one of his most famous stories that he told, where he describes these two sons who actually went away from their dad. One son ran away from his dad. He took his dad's inheritance, and he went and he lived however he wanted to. But then Jesus also described this other son who actually stayed by his dad, but he was emotionally distant from his dad. He was doing everything right. He was keeping all of the rules so that he could get whatever he wanted from his dad and just leave him anyway. So he was in the same spot as that other son. And what the dad ultimately wanted was for both sons to be relationally connected with him. And we actually see this play out in the story of Jonah. Chapters 1 and 2 of Jonah's story, he actually runs from God by disobeying him and breaking the rules. Chapters 3 and 4, he runs from God by being self-righteous and trying to hold on and keep all of the rules. Now, I don't know which way you lean, whether it's by breaking the rules or keeping the rules, but here's what's true when we run from God. The reason why we run from God is because we don't fully trust him. We think we're better off. We think that we can do a better job with our decisions, and we can have a better control of our outcomes. And this was true for me in those early 20s years, where I felt like, hey, God, I have a better plan for my career. I have a better plan for what it is that I want to do. God, just let me go ahead and do what it is that I want to do. And then it's when we do that, we learn the second lesson from Jonah, and that is every sin has a storm attached to it. There's a point where I wonder if Jonah on the boat was wondering if he actually thought that he successfully got away from God. Like, hey, the sea's calm. I'm on this nice boat to Spain. It's all right. And then all of a sudden, the waves, they came. We might have this point where we think we got it all under control. We're managing it. We're handling it. But then something happens, and the storm comes, and we find ourselves in a season of difficulty. See, the good news of the storm that God sent to Jonah was that God was not done with him yet. The bad news was he had to go through a storm. And the good news for us is that God is not done with us yet. The bad news is it may take a storm to get our attention. Now, here's what this doesn't mean. This doesn't mean that every time we go through some troubles or a difficult season, it's because we are running from God. But what it does mean is that every time that we run, every time that we take ourselves away from God, there is a storm that's going to be attached to it. The late, great pastor Tim Keller, who recently just passed away, he said this as he was leading his church in New York before he passed away. I thought this was so helpful. He says, "The Bible does not say that every difficulty is the result of sin, but it does teach that every sin will bring you into difficulty." And this is what I experienced when I was running from God. It led to that time of loneliness and anxiety and fear and distress. And it was one of those signals for me that, yes, this is the storm that is attached to my running from God. Every time we run, there's a storm that's going to be attached to it. Which then leads to the third thing we learn. And that is that running will affect those closest to us. And when we look at Jonah's story, it wasn't just Jonah who was impacted by that storm. It was also the sailors and the captain of the boat. And we realize that when we run from God, it's not just us that is impacted by it, but those who are in our inner circle, they're going to be impacted by it as well. Meaning, if you're a parent and you're running from God, who's going to be impacted by it? It's going to be our kids. Our significant others, they're going to be impacted by our running in some way. Some of you right now, the reason why you're going through a difficult season right now isn't because of your running, it's because someone you are close to is running from God and it's impacting you. This is often seen in high school students when they look at their friends or their family members and that person that's close to them is running and it's impacting them. And we might see these lessons that we learn from Jonah, and we might think, oh, this just seems so down. Like, this is a downer thing. Is this going to be a downer series this whole time? Like, is this the journey that we really want to go on? And while it might feel down at first, it doesn't end there. In fact, Jonah's first chapter actually ends on a very positive note. And it goes this way. Here's what happens after Jonah is thrown in the sea. Notice the words that the author uses. He says, "Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights." And what we see is this fish actually is being used by God to save Jonah, because Jonah would have died in the storm there, but God sent this fish to rescue him. This isn't Jonah's punishment to be in the fish. The author used the word provided. God sent this fish to demonstrate his grace and mercy to Jonah so that Jonah could get what he didn't deserve, another chance. Now, this fish isn't the greatest of the accommodations, for Jonah. It wasn't a pleasant experience to be there. We're going to talk more about that next week. But what we do see is that God gave Jonah this ability to come back to him. And one of the biggest lessons that we can learn from the story of Jonah right here early on is that you can run from God, but you can't outrun God. That God is going to send you a way that you can come right back to him. And for Jonah, it was this fish. For me, it was a friend named Chris. Because I was in my 20s, and I came across him, and I've known him for a few years. We were part of the same church that I became a follower of Jesus at, and he noticed that, I was away for a while, and took me out for a coffee. And we were talking. I was just kind of letting him know what was going on in my life. And he listened, and then he lovingly challenged me. He said, "Hey, Tyler, here's what I see what's going on in you right now. You're running. You're running from God. You're running from God. And as you're running from God, here's what's happening. All of that you're dealing with right now is a result of your running. And so I'm just going to tell you these 2 words. Stop running. Just stop running." And that conversation was actually the beginning of a journey for me to go from running from God to this repair where I began to encounter God in a whole new way. And see, that's how much God loves us. We can run from him, but we can't outrun him. He's always going to provide a way for us to go back to him. And for you today, for you in Oak Creek Franklin, for you online, your way back to him may just be found in those 2 words. Stop running. just stop running. Just stop running, because when you're running, the storm's attached to it. God loves you too much to let you just run from him. He may provide that storm to get your attention, but he's going to provide a way back to him so that you, like Jonah and like me, can experience his grace and mercy so you can come right back to him. And so as we wrap up our time together, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to give all of us an opportunity to acknowledge, hey, that we've been running from God. But even more than that, I'm going to give us an opportunity for us to make the commitment right now to say, yeah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop running. And so here's what I'm going to ask all of us to do, Oak Creek Franklin, online, Greenfield. I'm going to ask all of us just right now to just close our eyes and bow our head. And I want you to ask yourself, are you running from God? How are you running from him? What's the step that he's asking you to take that you just say, nah, I'm not going to go there, I'm going to run from him? And as you're acknowledging that right now, if you're ready to make that commitment, say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop running. I'm going to ask you to take a big, bold step. And remember, everyone's eyes are closed, everyone's heads are bowed. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm just going to ask you just to raise your hand wherever you are right now at any of our locations, Greenfield, online, Oak Creek, Franklin. Raise your hands. If you're going to make the commitment, say, I'm going to stop running right now. Go ahead and raise your hands. It's so great to see so many hands raising, so many people just taking that step, saying, I'm going to stop running from God. I'm going to take the way back to him. So great. Here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Right now, I'm going to lead us into a time of praying where we are going to commit together. And we're going to make this commitment, say we're going to stop running, and we are going to turn back to God. This is the first step that we're going to take on our journey to go back from running to repairing. We're going to learn about the next steps over the next few weeks. But right now, we're just going to make this commitment. Some of you who have your hands raised, this is the very first time that you are going to say, I'm going to stop running. I'm going to go back to God. You've never trusted Jesus before. You made this commitment to follow him. Here's what I want you to do at the end of this prayer. I want you to follow my lead as we pray this prayer, to commit to following him. So wherever you are, let's pray together. God, those of us who have our hands raised, God, we acknowledge that we have been running from you. God, you've called us to take a step towards you or to do something, and for whatever reason, we just thought we could do things better our own way, and here's what we discovered: we can't do it. And God, we realize that things have become tough. There's been that storm. We've gone through this. And God, we realize that your way really is better than our way. And so God, right now, we make that commitment to stop running. God, we're just going to stop it. We're going to stop it. And we're going to take the way back to you that you have provided for us. God, we know what that means. That means surrendering to you and following you and trusting that your way really is better than our way anyways. Father, I pray for those of us who are doing this in Oak Creek, Franklin, and online in Greenfield right now, who have not made the choice to follow you at all up until this moment right now. And Father, right now, we just pray together that we realize that we have ran away from you, and it's broken our relationship with you. But God, you didn't leave it broken. You gave us your son, Jesus, who came, lived among us, sinless, died on the cross, was buried, but burst from that grave to give us new life because he defeated death and sin. It's in him that we put our trust. And we know that when we follow him, we receive a new life in him. God, right now, we receive that life that we know lasts forever with you. We thank you that you love us so much that you gave us your son, Jesus, and it's in his name that we pray. Amen. Well, hey, if you made the decision to follow Jesus for the very first time today, I want you to know we are so proud of you for taking that step, and we are excited for you, and we want to help you on this journey of what it means to follow him. And one of the first things that you can do is actually pull out your phone and just text the word Jesus to the phone number that you'll see on the screen. That's 414-509-0339. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to text you back over the next couple of weeks and just some steps to get started and on this journey of following Jesus. And then one of our pastors is going to text you as well and just check in on you and answer any questions that you may have. So I hope that you pull out your phone and you text the word Jesus to that phone number. But for all of us right now, what we're going to do is we're going to take some time. We're going to celebrate the fact that God did not just let us sit in the storm, that God provided a way back to him for us, that he gave us a way, that he's not given up on us at all, and we're going to stop running. We're going to learn what it means to experience a new life in him. So right now, we're going to spend some time celebrating. I'm going to invite all of us, wherever you are, let's stand up and let's sing to God together as a way to celebrate.
lost another one. I am free. Oh, I am free. Yeah, I am free. Have lost another one. I am free. Oh, I am free. I am free. Have lost another one. I am free. I am free. Pick me up and turn me around. Place my feet on solid ground. I thank the Master. I thank the Savior, because He healed my heart, changed my name. Forever free, I am not the same. I thank the Savior, and I thank God. I thank God.
If you decided to stop running from God and are trusting Jesus to lead your life for the first time today, congratulations. That's a huge deal, and we are so excited for you. Jesus is going to take you on a journey to becoming more like Him. And I get it. It might feel very overwhelming right now, but we want you to know that you are not alone, and we want to help. So with what to do next, we can help. Just text the word Jesus to 414-509-0339. And you'll get some text messages back over the next 2 weeks with the next right steps of how to get going on this journey. And one of our pastors will also reach out to you just to check in and answer any questions you might have. Now, as you finish texting, I want to share something that's been going on behind the scenes here at the Ridge, and it's got us in a place we've never been before. We're hearing Jesus ask us to step in and help our neighbors, love our neighbors in a way we didn't see coming. So let's watch this video together.
Hey Ridge family, maybe you remember back in June, we came together across all our campuses and online, and we said that we were going to pack the pantry. And by that, we meant that we were going to collect and donate enough items for 3 local food pantries. Well, in Ridge fashion, we crushed our goal and we collected what we thought was enough to pack those pantries in New Berlin, Greenfield, and South Milwaukee through the end of July. But that's not what happened. Now, over the last few weeks, all of those pantries, including our partner at City on the Hill in Milwaukee, they've been reaching out to me, and they're saying that they've got nothing left or pretty close to it, and their shelves are empty. So we went back to see for ourselves.
Well, our shelves are already empty. We don't have that much left, which is not great for this time of the month, but we work with what we have. So we need your help because the need has definitely increased.
It's been a busy summer. We're seeing a lot of new families, a lot of need out there, and less donations in the summer. So any help that we can have would be greatly appreciated to fill up our stacks of food again. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Arden, the CEO of City on a Hill. Thank you so much for our partners that step up during times of emergencies in our community. We have a need for that right now. As you can see, we have a need to fill our food pantries with quality food for individuals in our community. So thank you for anything that you can do to help us fill these food pantries with quality food.
I'm not okay seeing and hearing that, and I know that you probably feel the same way. What I don't want you to miss is what God is doing here. He is trusting us with His kids. And these food pantries, they came to us and they're asking us to see this need and take it seriously. And we get to care about our neighbors. We get to be the church in big and bold ways. And in this moment when there is an emergency response, we get to do just that. Now for 1 week only, we are going to collect as many items as we can. And we're going to bring them all to the campuses and we're going to fill these pantries. Now right now, let's step into this gap and serve our communities in an urgent way that shows the love and hope that we all have as followers of Jesus.
Man, that's tough to see. Seeing those empty shelves and knowing that the people that are facing these tough times are our neighbors. But we have a plan to step in and help those neighbors. And I hope you'll join me and my family as we get involved. In the next week, here's what we're going to do. At all of our physical locations of the Ridge next week, we want you to come and bring as much non-perishable food with you as you can. We're going to park trucks outside, and we're going to pack them full of food to bring to these pantries. So if you're coming in person, bring food with you. If you're not in Southeast Wisconsin, if you can't come to a service next week, go to the website, theridgecc.com/packthepantry. There's a link there to an Amazon wish list, and you can order items from there, and they'll be shipped directly to City on a Hill. So that's another great way to help. Remember, we've got just 1 week to do this, so let's go big, love big for our neighbors. Another way you can be generous and really help our vision to bring the hope of Jesus into every home is by financially giving to the church right now. And every penny of what is given goes towards that vision, bringing the hope of Jesus into more and more homes. So please take a moment to give now, and I'll be back to wrap up our time together. Thanks for doing that. My bet is if you've stuck around this long for an online church service, part of you wants to not just watch the service online. You'd really like to be a part of a community. And that's what church is, whether it's online or in person. It's a community of people coming together to learn about Jesus together. And we want to help you connect with our community. And the easiest way to do this is to text the word connect to the number you see on the screen or scan the QR code and tell us about yourself. And someone from our team will get in touch to help to get you connected in our community and see how you can get involved. This is a place where you can belong. So join us next week or online or in person as we pack the pantry and learn more about On the Run and continue that series. And again, we're packing the food pantries, so let's meet the need of our community next week and selflessly serve them, because serving our community in this way is such a great way to participate in the vision to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. Have a great week.
Take you, gonna take you there.